Recording in progress.
All right, gents. Gonna give it a couple of minutes here for everyone to roll in and then we'll get started. Just gonna re-promote to the group. 1 second here. All right, folks, let's get started here. Okay, so this is going to be part two, conducting interviews for corporate roles. Okay, and we're actually going to be covering different titles, talking a little bit about entry points, how to conduct the interview, and land that dream tech sales role. So, with that being said, let's start off at the bottom of the hierarchy, the entry level B2B SDR role. So, with that being said, when it comes to these corporate interviews that are going to be a bit more extensive, right? Typically, you're going to be looking at 3 to 4, maybe even 5 rounds of interviews at different levels inside of the organization, starting off with first the internal or external recruiter call. That's typically over the phone, right? Where they took a look at your resume, you bypassed the ATS system. There was something that caught their attention that was on that piece of paper that made them commit the 30 minutes to an hour of a initial HR screening call with you. So the mindset going into this call is what I just previously described, right? There was something that already caught their attention that they're willing to commit their time to you. So it's on you to ensure that you're not going to show any bright red flags for them to shut you down and think that you're not qualified, prepared at this point in your career for that particular JD that they posted, job description opportunity that they have posted. Okay. So they're generally looking for culture fit from an HR perspective. And I would say at the BDR level, which is what we're talking about first here. We're going to talk about the different rounds when it comes to the BDR role, and then we're going to talk about the different rounds when it comes to the account executive role. But with the BDR role first, they're just looking for someone that fits that general profile of what an SDR behaviors talk sounds like, right? So, with that being said, the stakes are going to be pretty low on this initial corporate SDR screening call, right? They're looking for someone that has a little bit more intangibles compared to skill set. Honestly, if you're an ambitious person and a confident person, you should be able to pass this round with ease. Okay, because like I said previously, they're looking for more like bright red flags when it comes to a culture fit and the general profile. Those more intangibles like ambition, like work ethic, right? Does he fit the general culture? Do I think that he's a good professional and employee, right, to join our organization? So as long as you understand those basic behaviors and match it to that corporate environment and culture, right? We're talking about white collar. We're gonna have to be show a level of business acumen and professionalism. You should be good to go on this initial interview. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this initial round because honestly, guys, like thinking back in my career, when I landed my very first SDR role, once you get enough exposure to this particular round, it should become second nature to you, right? They're going to ask, a general subset of questions. Think about Kelsey, 23 years old, right? Fresh college grad. She's in HR. She's in the recruiting role. She literally has a checkbox of, 5 to 10 attributes or questions that she's required to ask you about, tell me a little bit about your sales background and experience. Tell me a little bit about what attracted you to this company. Tell me a little bit about why you chose the SDR role. Like all of these general questions are going to be repeated over and over and over and over and over, right? So as long as you stick to the same narrative, right, you take a volume based approach and attempt to go on as many interviews as possible, you're going to come to that realization that it's the exact same subset of questions, regardless of the company that you go to, when it comes to the HR recruiter screening call, right? So come up with your talk track, and you're going to see a common theme with our conversation here today. I'm going to be talking about narrative, right? It's all about the story that you sell and how you best position yourself in that particular interview over performance and even over qualifications. I've applied to and landed roles that I was not qualified for in the quote unquote right timeline. I need to wait 12, 18 months before getting an account executive roles. No, I always applied early, saw what the market feedback looked like, right? If I was getting no traction from the ATS system, well, that's telling me that I need more experience, right? But when I was passing through on the ATS system, because I take that approach of ABI, always be interviewing, right? Even if I'm currently employed and I love my company, if there's another organization that's on my dream list of organizations, and they give me a call or they give me a response back on that cold application that I sent out, I'm definitely going to go through the interview process, right? So you should always be testing these things to understand what your market value looks like, and you'll always understand your market value if you're always interviewing. Okay. So with that being said, test the market and see if it accepts you. If not, cool, then you need more experience in that particular role, right? But I've been passed through, with 9 months, less than quote unquote the traditional advice you're going to see on Twitter or LinkedIn or from recruiters about how much experience you need. I've also not fit the job description on listings, and I still got the role, right? Because it's about narrative and how you position yourself, how you're prepared for that particular opportunity, and why you're better than the other candidates. Okay. So always keep that in mind. And it's especially true when it comes to the entry level roles. When I say entry level roles, I'm talking about BDR. Okay. And I'm also talking about SMB account executive. That's also an entry level role. That's the entry level account executive role. So with that being said, okay, let's move on to the second round here. The second round is typically the hiring manager interview. Okay. So in my opinion, this is the most important interview of the process. This is really what determines if you get the job. Okay. It's not the last round of the interview. It's the second interview, how you connect with that particular manager, how you sell them the dream, your narrative on why you're the best candidate, right? And what they're looking for here. And also keep in mind, before we talk about what they're looking for, at each stage of the interview, they're always collaborating and sharing notes. They're creating a profile for you, right? The recruiter is going to connect with the manager. Hey, I think Fidel fits the profile of a pretty good BDR role in this business unit. I want you to chat with them. Here's a lead for you, right? The manager can take a look at the lead. He pretty much is required to accept it, honestly, and give you a shot. So, what are they looking for on the hiring manager interview when it comes to a BDR? Again, they're not necessarily looking for experience, and they're not necessarily looking for skill set, because everyone who is applying for a BDR role is also entry level, right? You don't need sales experience to get a corporate BDR role. The corporate BDR role is your sales experience for your career, right? So it's all about, again, talking about those intangibles. But since you've made the investment, you're inside communities like Desperado Sales Group. You're following, tech sales accounts on X. You've already made those investments. You're going the extra mile against those other candidates that are just mass applying and looking to get an appointment setter role, BDR role, right? So deploy a little bit more of those strategies, right? Talk a little bit more about those topics that we talk about when it comes to prospecting. Maybe you don't have that experience on your resume, but just you being aware of these particular prospecting strategies, which is the primary role of the SDR, right? You're going to set yourself apart, given that you already, number one, understand the behaviors, which we just talked about on the recruiting call, right? And number two, excuse me, you actually have tact to follow as well too. And by the way, the prospecting strategy that we talk about here, high probability prospecting, is probably the highest level of prospecting that you can get, right? This is an enterprise account executive prospecting strategy, what I'm teaching you guys to do in an SDR role, because it makes you more efficient. It makes your life easier. So talking about some of these concepts, right, of like profiling accounts, how to conduct a profiling call, talking about how you're going to nurture accounts, talk about, trigger event finding, talk about different buying windows, right? Buying conversations versus selling conversations. Like just generally being able to talk about these concepts is how you're going to better position yourself compared to the other candidates, right? And the beauty of sales is that compared to other roles like an accountant or maybe a software engineer, like if you think about their interview processes, they have to actually prove that they have the knowledge to get the job done. In the sales role, we only have to talk about the behaviors that are a top performer in order to get the job. So if you understand what those behaviors look like, all you have to do is speak to them and they're going to believe that you're a top performer as well too. That's the arbitrage, right? What does a top performer look like? Somebody come off mic. Give me some examples of traits that you think would make up a top performer inside of the SDR role.
Walk them through the process of how you'd build a list that fits, our HPP kind of process. Like you're going to look for external and internal triggers and put most of your time into those accounts because they have a way higher likelihood to buy.
Yeah. So you can walk them through some of your strategy, right? Some of the tactics that go into the SDR role and what top performance looks like. But maybe I didn't ask a clear question. I was talking about the behaviors, right? More of those intangibles, right? While everyone else on the interview is talking about how they're a hard worker and they don't mind making cold calls, all of these general things that they're going to hear in every other interview, you should be talking about what those behaviors and traits look like of a top performer, right? So to give you guys a list, they're quick to ramp, right? Their sole focus is figuring out who is our ideal client that we're selling to, right? And why do they buy from us? That's the very first thing that I'm looking to accomplish within my first couple of weeks inside of the organization, which is going to position myself to hit that quota as fast as possible. Because during the ramp period, as well as I do, Mr. Manager, that now is the time to make that money hand over fist, because I have a lower quota and I could get into accelerators and put myself on the path of overperforming on my quota and making as much money as possible, right? So my ramp period is I'm positioning it that I'm going to ramp as quickly as possible. Now, why this is valuable is because in the manager's eyes, people who ramp quickly, number one, hit their numbers. Okay. And you need to understand that your manager's number is also tied into the individual sales rep's number, whether you're an SDR or an account executive. So from the SDR's manager's perspective, he's looking for somebody that is a low risk option, that's not going to be a liability, that he doesn't have to train, that he doesn't have to handhold, that he doesn't have to invest a lot of time to, especially during that ramp period, because that's the biggest headache of a manager, right? Is that they are spread thin. They have 10 to 12 reps that they have to manage inside of their team, and they can't invest time training, invest from a time perspective into each individual sales rep. They typically only invest their time with the top performers, because when it comes to comp packages for management and VPs and the organization in general, everyone does not have to hit 100% for the company to hit 100% of their goals, right? It's more of like 40% of the reps need to hit their OTE in order for the company to hit their revenue goal overarching for that organization, right? That's the way it works. They already understand, the manager, if he's experienced, he already understands that the bottom 20% can be managed out, put it on a PIP, they're going to lay them off, right? So they know that already some of the people they hired are not going to be with the organization. They're going to be managed out. They're not going to invest some time into them, right? They understand that probably another 20 to 40%, 50% of the reps that they're having are going to be somewhere between 80 to like 120%, which is the average tech sales rep, right? They're hitting their numbers. They're kind of coasting. They're not taking it to that next level, or whatever reason they have that challenge of taking it to being number one on the team or being a top performer, hitting President's Club, etc. Those people stay inside of the organization, but they're not offered the promotion and the fast track to being promoted, right? Those are typically the people where it's like you're at 80 to 120%. They're giving you the runaround of like an 18-month timeline, right? A 24-month timeline to be promoted to account executive. Okay. And then what they're really looking for, what the manager is really looking for, is that Chad salesman, that top performer that can be in the top 20% of his team, and of course the organization, that makes up for that 20% that's not going to hit their number and ultimately shit the bed, right? And they also make up for those guys that are sitting at 83%, that they're not doing bad enough that they need to fire them, right? But ultimately the top 20% is what keeps the lights on for an organization. That's who they're looking to hire, because they understand the profile of that BDR does not need to be trained, right? They're not going to have a long ramp period. They're not a risk to the organization. And also they make that manager look good, because if we're talking about these entry level roles, whether it's a BDR role or an account executive role, you're tied in not only from a performance perspective. So he's thinking about, all I need is 40% of my team, for example, to hit their number. Okay. I need like one or two top performers, and I'm going to receive my bonus, right? Which the comp structure of managers is typically like, it's very aggressive on the bonus side, right? Typically similar to an OTE, like a 50-50 split, a 60-40 split. An SDR manager may receive a salary of 120,000, but with bonuses, they can make 250 or 300K. So it's absolutely necessary, and they actually have more at risk in terms of dollars and cents of them not hitting their number as a team, right? So they're looking for, again, that top performer that's going to ensure that they make their bonus, that justifies their decision to get into management. Because typically managers are people that have prior sales experience and maybe sales experience at that company. Okay, it's kind of a risk going into management, because if your team doesn't hit their number, you're going to make less money than that SDR manager was at whatever SMB AE or mid market AE. Okay, so you want to position yourself as that candidate. That's who they're looking for. That is, the person that they're going to bring inside of their organization. And all you have to do is just be able to have that conversation, right? And understand like what's at stake for that manager as well too. Like just being able to describe what I just told you back to him so that he feels understood and he feels like you also have skin in the game is going to entrust provide you more trust and credibility in itself. Does this make sense to everyone? Anything I can clarify before we move on? Yeah, competent, right? Nobody wants to hire someone that they have to train. Let me make that very clear, right? When we talk about crafting a narrative and why you, right? Why should they make a decision to hire you? Which we're going to have a conversation here in a second. I'm going to clarify that for you. Nobody wants to give someone a shot, especially in this economy with software contractions, with quota attainment being like 50% or something like that for the BDR role. Nobody wants to train you up to become that top performer. They don't even want to train up the people that are hitting their numbers that are within that range. Again, average tech sales rep 80 to 120%. They're safe, right? But they're not the golden boy that's actually going to pay the bills for the manager. Okay. He doesn't even want to train those people and transform them into a top performer. His only time and attention, the best leads, the best territory, right? These things compound when they bucket you as an A player. Okay, I think we had this conversation previously, but the managers are on the interview, they are thinking about bucketing you into these three categories. Top performer, top 20%, he's an A player. He doesn't need much support from me. He's going to be able to perform on his own. He's going to make me look good so I get promoted. And also he's going to help me make my bonus. B player, he's doing just enough to not get fired. I'm going to give him the runaround when it comes to a promotion, right? Because you're a slight risk. You're kind of inconsistent quarter to quarter, right? So you're a B player. You have the potential to level yourself up and be an A player, but you also have the potential to become a C player very quickly as well too. So those are high risk. C players, they write you off within the first 90 days. Right. If they understand that you're not catching traction, like you haven't set a meeting yet, like they already know, we're like, yeah, we're going to give Fidel 6 to 8 months and he's out of here. Like they're going to manage you out by cutting off opportunity, right? They're not going to give you the best inbounds. They're not going to give you the best territory. They're not going to give you the best account executive. They stack the card against you. And that's how they manage you out. But on the flip side, if you're a top performer, they give you the keys to the kingdom. They give you the account executives that are going to close deals, that are going to make you more money. They give you the better territory, right? They give you more resources and support. He'll show you one-on-one time and attention. He's going to show you where to find the best leads in the CRM. Like these sort of things, they're rather going to bet their money on the horse that's going to win the race. Okay, makes sense to everyone? So we want to at least be able to talk about what that A player looks like. Okay, because if you understand the behaviors and also you're in this community and you understand the strategy, how to be an A player, they're going to be confident that ideally, at least you sold them on that idea that you're going to be an A player for their organization as well too. Before we talk about crafting a narrative and why you and how to sell the dream, any questions about anything that we covered thus far?
Yeah, this might be a silly question, but could it ever come to the point where you're overselling yourself and it could cause like backfire? Like the manager can think like, oh, he's probably hiding something. Like, why is he talking about how ambitious he is or things of that nature?
Yeah, I think that a little bit of logic should go into it and also professionalism, right? So when I say selling the dream, I'm not going to be talking about, oh, hey, Mr. Manager, I'm going to be your top performer. I'm going to be 150%. I'm going to be the fastest to ramp. Like not that direct communication, but I'm talking about the indirect communication where you understand some of these concepts that we talked about previously. And again, just having this conversation with him to understand his situation right? Like I often do this even to this day, right? Like I said, ABI, I'm always interviewing. I like my company. I'm probably going to end my tech sales career here in the next 2 to 3 years at the same company. I love my manager. He's probably the best manager I've ever had in my life. I love my manager and you know, channel partners and BDRs. Everything's great. I have one of the best territories too, not to brag, right? I have one of the best territories too. I replaced the guy that went into strategic. But anyways, um, where was I going with that? Okay, yeah. So, you know, I just make them feel understood. And by me understanding what the true conversation lies and understanding that this guy's looking for an A player, like literally say that, right? Like on the interview, like I kind of drop the wall, so to speak, on the interview where it's like, hey Zach, I know you've probably been slammed with meetings back to back, and how many reps are you managing again? Yeah, you got 10 reps you're managing. You're kicking off a new quarter, so you know, it's like I'm sure things are pretty hectic right now. I'll try to, you know, knock this out within the 30 minutes that we have, and then roll into the conversation. Then he's like, oh, this guy gets it. Like he understands me, right? He understands I've been on, you know, 15 hours worth of interviews for this damn BDR role, and 13 of them can't even get their fucking camera turned on. Another guy was like texting on the interview. Like it's a real shit show, especially for the entry level roles. Like BDR and SMB, your you know, talent pool is very low, right? These are people interviewing that will never be in the industry at all, and these sorts of things, right? So, you know, kind of laughing at that and acknowledging that is also going to make them feel more comfortable of like, oh, this guy gets it. Right. Which is also kind of like dating as well, too. Right. It's like girls don't want to date the guy that doesn't get it. They want to be like, oh, it's the right place, right time. And this guy got it. That's the exact same sort of like indirect communication that I'm showing competency because I understand their situation and the way the system operates. Do you get me?
No, definitely that cleared up.
Yeah. And it's like, man, I can only imagine for you know, a BDR role, we probably got all different sorts of characters and stories to tell. But you know, before we talk more about that, you know, with every single person that I conduct an interview with, I want to understand like what are kind of their you know, professional drivers and how that ties into the company. Like, share with me a little bit about, you know, where you see yourself as an SDR manager and where you're hoping to go. Right. So that's a great point leading into that, right? You should be controlling the conversation, okay? Everyone should think about this like a game of tennis, okay? Every time they ask you a question, they hit the tennis ball on the other end of the court. You should always be asking a follow-up question, okay? A more higher level, broader, okay? Ambiguous question, honestly, that they can take in any which way or direction. And primarily, we should be the one asking the questions and controlling the conversation. Everyone understands this. Person who asks the questions controls the conversation. So when they ask us a question that's going to be very stale and very basic of like, hey, why are you interested in joining Microsoft? Yeah, at the end of the day, when you receive a DM from a recruiter from a Fortune 100 company like that, I mean, who can turn that down? Ha ha ha. Right. It's like, but with that being said, like share a little bit about how you guys are staying competitive in the market with this, you know, AI rollout and, you know, what are the plans here for 2025? Some of the goals you're looking to hit. See, that's a more broader level question that can turn into an entire conversation that I can also ask another follow-up question, right? And clarification questions and keep the primary focus on them versus their primary focus being questioned back to back on us, right? It does not, if your interview sounds like an interrogation where you're answering questions directly and you're not answering the question, then asking a follow-up question, you're not doing well on the interview, okay? However, what a good interview sounds like is you're asking thoughtful questions that makes them pontificate or go on a soliloquy to answer your question, right? Where you're inspiring ideas and thought, okay? And also taking yourself out of the equation, right? I do not want the focus to be on me during the interview. I want my focus to be on the organization and that manager specifically to understand what are his incentives, the way he thinks, the way the company operates, where they are now and where they're hoping to go. I'm looking to ultimately qualify the opportunity. You do not want to get qualified, you want to qualify. Make sense? So with that being said, so just keep that in mind, right? Every time, listen back to this, right? Think of Fidel when you're on the interview. Every time I'm asked a question, I'm going to answer it short, sweet, crisp, to the point. I'm not going to ramble on with my answer, right? 2 to 3 sentences directly answering the question, and then have another thought-provoking question to follow up. That's going to turn into a larger conversation. Okay? Every time. Yeah, I have a list of questions. It's a general interview question checklist. I believe it's pinned in the resume interviewing room. If not, I'll make sure to post that for you guys. But honestly, there should be like a genuine curiosity about the company and like a qualification process, right? Like at the end of the day, guys, like not all opportunities are good opportunities, right? We've talked about this previously. Like not all OTEs are real, right? Not all business units are created equal inside of a company, right? So you guys really need to qualify what these opportunities look like because they can make or break your career, right? They can throw you off the path of promotion, right? If you're talking about the BDR role, everyone wants to get to account executive, right? Everyone wants to not only get to account executive, but they want to get to upmarket account executive. That's why we got into tech sales, right? Everyone wants to make 400K a year. We didn't get into tech sales to be a BDR making 80K, right? So ultimately, we want to make sure we're joining the right organizations that are going to position ourselves to have that resume insurance policy in terms of large organizations that have product market fit, right? That have a great sales process currently in place, that are a market leader, that are investing into their people and their technology. That's the sort of company I want to join. And if that's the profile of the company that I want to join, I want to ask questions around that. Talk to me a little bit about the tech stack. What do you guys currently have in place? Talk to me a little bit about competition. How are you guys investing in the company to make sure that you guys are the market leader? Talk to me a little bit about the business unit. Like what does performance look like and how do you think it could be improved? Okay. So ask these sort of questions, right? To where the pressure is on them. The manager is on his back foot. You're not the person to be on their back foot because if you just let them unload questions on you, right, you're putting yourself in a position where you are going to make mistakes, right? The more questions that are asked of you, the more opportunities for you to incorrectly answer those questions and disqualify yourself. So I kind of think of it as like a game, right? Like a tug of war of like, hey, I need to be controlling the conversation. So I need to be asking better questions that's going to make them respond in a paragraph versus a sentence. Does this help? Cool. Um, Fidel, can you talk about what to ask recruiter in initial calls as opposed to hiring managers like you've been covering? Yeah, so when it comes to the recruiter call, this is sort of a tack that I use that often works well. I ask questions that I know that they don't know the answer to, right? Like I talk about like quota attainment with this particular territory or business unit that I'm applying to. I asked a little bit about maybe what the tech stack looks like and these sorts of questions that are designed for the hiring manager to qualify the opportunity, but it shows acumen, it shows experience, and it also shows that I'm serious and committed to the opportunity, right? Because I raise my value, guys. Think about bow tie sales guy, right? The dynamic, the power dynamic in conversation and persuasion, right? I raise my value when I disqualify opportunities. I lower my value when I qualify myself. Every candidate is talking about how they're the hardest worker and that they just want to sell cutting edge technology and be in the AI space or whatever the fuck it is. Like you want to be the exact opposite. You want to be skeptical going into these, and you absolutely should be to protect your career, right? But yeah, to go into Ian's question here, he said, yeah, 1 of 24 reps hit OTE on my team last year. Qualify 100% at a big company too. Yep. Can you talk about what to ask? Yeah. So we answered that about the recruiter, right? You should be asking these sorts of questions about like what performance looks like. What does the general tech stack look like? What's the vision for the company? What are their plans here for the end of the year? Definitely refer to the general interview question checklist as well too. Okay. Next question here, Fidel. What do you think of these exercises or presentations that are becoming more common in the interview process? It also just shows us the level of competition and contraction in the marketplace, right? Because new hires are seen more as liabilities versus assets, right? There are more liability sales reps than there are assets in the company, right? There's always going to be more C players than A players. There's going to be more B players than A players. Well, what we're seeing is because of just talking about the general market, and this will be a little bit of a conversation off topic, but during the ZIRP era, zero interest rate, is growth at all costs for companies. So what they did is they flooded the territories and the markets. They actually overgrew, and that was a lot of because of funding and because public equity markets, stock markets at all-time highs, and a lot of these different things, basically from I'd say like 2016 to about 2021, maybe 2022, depending on your industry. But companies overgrew. So when they overgrew, right, they scaled their operations too far. But what we're realizing about the software space, and this is something Peter Thiel talked about on his recent interview. If you guys haven't listened to that, definitely check it out. But with that being said, he was explaining the same concept about how like the software space actually is not innovating and growing at this point, right? That like cloud software, which was created in the 2000s, was essentially probably everyone that's employed in the software market sells some sort of cloud software. It's all cloud software. It's all white labeled, like Microsoft Azure packaged, branded in a different company that's being sold. Whether you're an HCM, ERP, it doesn't matter. SCM, it's all the same platforms. Right. So essentially, it's all the same solution. But the demand for those solutions, when interest rates rise and the cost of capital is higher, less people are buying, there's less demand for the solution. Okay. So there's less demand for sales reps. So they reduced headcount because they overhired. And they thought that there was more demand. So I'll give you guys an example. Like a business unit of a territory I'm on right now has 8 reps. Okay, we cover a couple of states here, right? For example, in 2021, my team may have had 15 reps because they thought that there was so much demand that they can now break down the territories to metro cities. So versus Fidel having Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana, Fidel has Houston. However, people were missing quota because there was too many reps on the team because there wasn't actually that much demand for everyone to hit quota to be the territories to be smaller. So when you lay off reps, it expands the territory. They see that demand is for these 3 states or for to fulfill for 8 reps, not 15 anymore. Is everyone following me? Okay, so basically they overgrew, they flooded territories, realized that there wasn't that much demand within those territories, then they lay people off. They keep the A players, some B players survived. Okay, now things are kind of back to normal in terms of demand for solutions at this point. So we're kind of attempting a bounce back to the software space. We're seeing kind of more of a concentrated demand for solutions and capital allocation as well too, going to highly specialized markets like the AI space, like the cyber space. Previously, the healthcare space, they're about to get wrecked by the new administration. Trump just passed a bill that they're defunding healthcare, basically, right? And a lot of these healthcare startups that used to have demand for the solution because of lower interest rates as well as government funding and tax credits they're offering clients, those are being taken away, right? So that's why what I talk about, guys, like when you're pursuing a new role and you're in that space, you need to be following the money, right? You need to be paying attention to politics and these bills that are being passed and what funding looks like for these particular markets. Like literally the big, beautiful bill that they just talked about is going to compress the compounded annual growth rate of healthcare. So if you're in the health tech space, I'll consider leaving, right? Less demand for your solution. And just to give you guys an example, like literally, government funding leads these things, right? Government funding first, then venture capital and private equity follows it, then follows investments into the company, hiring people for demand for that particular solution. So like in the healthcare space, I know there were companies that they literally offer like flat discounts because they have tax incentives and tax credits to sell that particular solution. Well, once that tax credit's taken away, there's going to be less of a value proposition and also less demand for that solution. It's the exact same thing as the solar space or, tax credits to make Teslas. They're going to make less Teslas because less tax credits are going to go towards electric. Okay. Anyways, a bit off topic, but with that being said, right, you want to control the conversation. You want to make sure you're asking those qualification questions. And at the end of the day, guys, like if you don't feel comfortable, okay, asking those qualification questions, do it regardless as you build that muscle. Like, please realize that Interviewing is a skill. It is a muscle. If you don't work out your biceps won't grow. If you don't go on interviews, you're not going to be good at interviewing. I don't care if you're a great salesperson. Interviewing is still a skill. I know guys in my personal network that are way better salespeople than me. Okay. They're 180%, but they can't interview for shit. And they sit on the shelf for a quarter or maybe even 2 quarters because they can't interview well. They can't target companies well. They don't know internal referrals. They don't know the cold outbound strategies, right? So the best man wins that spins up the best narrative, that has the best strategy, that knows how to interview. It's not the best skill rep gets the job, right? So with that being said, controlling the conversation, asking those qualification questions, and at least an attempt, especially at entry-level roles, like take the pressure off of yourself. Again, they're not looking for you to be perfect at this point. Okay, if you were perfect, you'd be hired for an enterprise BDR role, or you'd be hired as an account executive, right? They understand most people don't have experience interviewing or having tech sales experience, a lot of these different things. But with that being said, controlling the conversation is going to be super important. And then let's talk about creating your narrative. Okay, I think that this is really the selling point. This is your value proposition. We're not going to sell ourselves by talking about how we're the, from a intangible perspective of, hey, I'm going to be a hard worker, I'm going to be your top performer. That's sort of like direct communication, which everyone says. Okay, there's no meat to that. There's no value to those words, right? However, what is more valuable is you selling the dream and you crafting a narrative of why you and why now. Which, by the way, if you guys haven't seen my Twitter thread on conducting interviews, why you and why now, it's pinned on my profile. You should definitely take a look at it if you're interviewing right now. But long story short, you want to come up with your story. Stories sell. Okay, think of podcasts, think of movies, Netflix. Humans love stories. Okay, apply a little bit of ethos, work in a little bit of ethos, a little bit of emotion about your story. I'm not saying you're going to create a sob story about why you need this job, to be very clear. You want to position yourself this kind of like bittersweet story of why you are the best fit for this particular role. Now let's have a conversation in the mind of a manager, like we've been doing throughout this call. In the mind of a manager, this is a hard, brutal truth. They love people that have incentives to work harder, to be more productive. Okay. And one of those greatest incentives are going to be people that are not in the greatest financial situations, just to be real with you. Like managers love the young sales BDR that has a 50K wedding to pay for, that he's saving up to buy a home, and he has a 50K student loan because he knows he's going to go to the extra mile. He's actually going to have that performance because he has actual liabilities and responsibilities that he needs to pay for. So creating that narrative, not necessarily saying, walking in on the interview, Fidel's not saying, hey, I got a 50K student loan I need to pay for, that's why you should hire me. No. Right? But sharing a little bit about your story at this point in time to help them understand where you're coming from and why you're going to outwork the next person. In entry-level roles, you do not sell skill set necessarily or tact because they don't expect you to have that, but they do expect you to be hungry and ambitious. Okay? Which, by the way, let's talk about how low the bar is, right? Like that should be everyone, but unfortunately most people don't. So I'll give you guys a great example. Okay, of the story I still even sell to this day. Okay, why would you hire Fidel? Well, you should hire Fidel because I'm a first generation Mexican American. I'm also a first generation university graduate, and I want to live the American dream where I can join a corporate organization like Microsoft that's being innovative, that's growing at 22%, where I can step in and build a long-term career to secure the financial future of my family. Right? They sacrificed coming to this country to create opportunity. Now it's my job to pick up the torch and take it to the next level. That's the story I tell all the time. Right? So to give you guys an example, would you rather hire Tyler that his dad just told him that he needs to get a job and get off the payroll because he's graduated and he hasn't had a job for 6 months, or Fidel that has a real reason, has a real story, and knows that he needs to work hard because he actually needs to make shit happen. Right? So I had a guy shoot me a DM. He just signed up for one-on-one coaching. Okay. He was like, Fidel, he's like, I like your content. I'm in an industry right now I don't like. He's like, I want to get into tech sales and I want to do it. I want to hit the ground running and do well. I was like, okay, but before we move forward, like why now? right? Like, why you've been following me for 18 months, liking stuff. Like, why do you want to make the decision now? He's like, I'm going to be honest, bro. Like, he's like, it's a similar story, but he's like, I just had a kid. He's like, I just had a kid and I want to pay for a house. Like, basically, I just need to get my shit together at this point, right? So, like, that's the exact story that we will craft together that will land him a great job at a public company that's going to convince a manager that this guy's going to take it to the next level, right? They want to ensure that you're self-motivated, but when you have external factors also motivating you, they're understanding that this guy's going to outwork the next person. Okay, so think of what that story may look like for you. Again, it's not a sob story, but it's truth, right? Tell your truth, craft your story. That's how you persuade people. We speak in stories, they're very persuasive. Okay. So come up with what that story looks like. And I also implore you to also understand the story of the manager you're interviewing with as well, too. What does his story look like? At the end of the day, no SDR manager wants to be an SDR manager. They don't go into management to be an SDR manager. Okay. It's actually a big sacrifice and it's a really shitty role, to be honest with you. Right. So, same thing with SMB manager. The SMB manager did not get into tech sales. He did not get into management to be an SMB manager. What are his aspirations? What are his goals? What does his story look like right now as well, too? I've had this conversation with managers, right? I really aligned with my manager, the one I liked that I said I'm going to try to see through my career with him because we aligned on the story, right? He's a little bit older. He's in his late 30s, like 39, but he was a top performing rep in his career. He was like 3 times President's Club at this company, right? Which also attracted me to join specifically their company because of him. But, he was sharing about how like, his goals and aspirations. He's like, look, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I got 5 kids. He's like, it's a lot. Like things are going up. He's like, however, I do see that I was always a top performer and a leader on my team. So I stepped into a management role to change this business unit. Plus, it's going to give me more opportunity and time to be hybrid, to not have to focus on like quarter over quota, to spend more time with my kids. Like I told my wife that I was going to be available to coach my son's softball team. And that's the reason why he's a manager. I'm like, awesome, man. Now I know what he's looking for. Now I know what he values. This is a quick quiz for anyone that wants to be confident and try. Based on that story that I just told you of the manager, what is he looking for in a candidate of an employee to manage? Cares about family. So what's important to him? Boom. Cares about time. So basically, indirectly, he's saying, I'm not looking to manage a bunch of wakers that don't know what they're doing. Like, I need A players that are going to make me efficient at my job, that are going to make me hit my numbers. By the way, I have 5 kids, right? So he's like, I better hit my fucking bonus because I already was a top performer too, by the way. He probably makes more money doing that, honestly. But he's like, I already was a top performer. I have a lot of liabilities. I have a lot of kids. And time is the most important thing to me. Good fucking job, right? Having time for his kids, time freedom, 100%. So that's what I'm going to sell him, my friends. That's what I'm going to sell him on the interview about how I'm going to allow him to take off at 3 p.m. because Fidel's already hitting his number. We're ahead in the quarter. So he gets what he wants and I get what I want. Okay? And aligning on that level, right? Our goals are aligned at that point, right? Of my story and his. Now he understands, again, equal skin in the game. I understand his situation. He feels seen or whatever you want to say. He's not having that conversation. He's probably thinking about that conversation versus the other candidates are just trying to sell themselves. Do you get me? Right? So it's kind of like a discovery call, honestly, for my account executives. Like you should be running your interviews kind of like a discovery call, right? Organizational goals, professional goals, personal goals. I want to get to personal goals. We're talking to humans here at the end of the day, right? You're not interviewing with Microsoft. You're interviewing with the manager, Brad, right? So we need to connect on that level and also, sell the next steps and be like, hey, it looks like we're in alignment here from an organizational perspective, like from a professional perspective, this fits what looks like the next step in growing me in my career. And also personally, like you shared a little bit about how time freedom is the most important to you. I couldn't agree more. right? I have a very entrepreneurial mindset, and I treat my sales roles kind of like a business, right? Managing my territory, how can I be as efficient as possible when it comes down to prospecting, when it comes down to managing my clients and relationships. But at the end of the day, right? Time freedom is the most important thing. So it sounds like we're in alignment. I'm really excited to see what next steps look like. Um, Sherry, the recruiter, told me that you guys are looking to fulfill a role for October 10th. Is that still the timeline for you guys? Yeah, by about October. Okay, great. So is it safe to say that I don't hear anything back from you guys by next weekend that you've decided to go in a different direction? Yeah, I would say not next week. That's a little soon, but probably by the third week of July. If you don't hear back from us by the third week of July, yeah, probably. Okay, completely understand. Appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure. Hope you guys have a great rest of your quarter and you hit your numbers. Speak soon. Right, close the conversation. Also set expectations, and I kind of set the frame for a follow up as well too. Then what I do after that interview, I send him a personalized email as well too. Again, thanking him for his time, and also maybe even recapping that conversation. Right, some of those personal goals and like the organizational goals, how they tie it in. Honestly, I've never done that before, but I just thought about it. That would be really taking it to another level, like really standing out, right? Because you want to leave that impression on the manager if you can take the conversation to that sort of level. Okay. I know we're at the hour mark. Hold on. I have another meeting. I'm going to push it back so we can open up some Q&A as well too. Hold on. Okay. All right. So that's the highlights I wanted to cover in terms of conducting the interview for corporate roles. With that being said, any questions, comments, concerns about the topic today? And feel free to come off mic or drop it inside the chat.
Yeah, I have a question. I've already booked a one-on-one because it's kind of a big one. I'm not sure if it's related to this, but going from like a corporate SDR to an SMB closing role, I mean, the biggest objection you get, like, hey, you don't have experience. Why should I get you versus I can pick, an AE with a good track record? Like, how would you overcome that?
The AE with a good track record, if he had a good track record, why would he be making a sideways step? Why? Why would I go from SMB AE to SMB AE if I'm really a top performer?
Yeah, that's true.
Ask him. See, I put it in his court. Versus someone that's proven with performance, that's highly ambitious, that realizes that he's outgrowing his organization. He's looking for an opportunity that can take him to the next level. As a manager, me personally, I would rather hire the no experience AE than the AE that's been an SMB AE for 3 years. Because I know the guy's ass. I know he's a B player at minimum and a C player most likely. Because if he wasn't, he'd be a mid-market AE. Right? We talked about the path to progression, what your resume should look like, right? Less than 24 months in the SDR role. Beyond 24 months, you are labeling yourself as a B or C player. Honestly, probably a C player. Same thing for SMBA. Less than 24 months. Less than 24 months. If you go beyond that, you're a B or a C player. They already know for a fact when you apply and when you walk in. Mid-market, the timeline's extended a little bit more. I'd probably say less than 48 months. Okay. If you go beyond that, you're a B or a C player. And then you're in the land of milk and honey enterprise, right? You could spend the rest of your career there at different levels depending on what it is, but it's not relevant right now for everyone. So I would ask him that question, right? Because if this is the organization I think it is that can provide the infrastructure, the training, the support, the resources, the channel partners, all these different things, if I can step inside of a well-defined process with the system, I already have proven performance that I can follow a process and be successful. Versus somebody that may have more experience than me, but they are working inside of different systems. They're going to bring bad habits. And also from a career progression perspective, if they've already been 24 months in this role, like what does that say about their prior performance? Why were they not already promoted at their organization? I would be brutally honest and say that. It's only your career, right? The stakes are high, dude. I'm not scared about asking that shit. Because I know, like, technically, my OTE is on the line. Like, this is a $300,000 conversation, or this is a $150,000 conversation, right? So, but you can only have that confidence to ask those questions if you have pipeline, just like sales. You're not going to have the confidence to ask hard questions on a discovery call as an AE, or ask hard questions as a BDR on a prospecting call, on a cold call, unless you have pipeline. Or Wi-Fi money, by the way. Pipeline, but in this context, right? Pipeline. So I need a pipeline of interviews. Because again, we're talking about volume and exposure. I'm absolutely a fan of the volume-based approach. At this point in my career, I've probably gone on, God, like 300 plus corporate interviews in my career, not including contract stacking, right? I've been on, hell, I don't even fucking know. By the end of my career, probably 1,000 interviews, right? So I already know what the questions are coming from. I can already pre-predict what they're going to be saying. I know how to guide the conversation, right? And I'm going to lead them down to a path of realizing that I'm the best candidate at that point, because I'm controlling the conversation, because I already know what they're looking for. I'm already going to answer with that one question they asked me. I'm going to answer 4 other questions that I know that they're going to ask in the future, right? And then I'm going to put the focus back on that manager of qualifying the opportunity. They're going to realize I'm higher status. They're going to realize I know what the fuck I'm doing. He's that competent A player. Even if I'm not, which, by the way, I'm a B player now. But I get A player opportunities and treatment because I know how to position myself, right? Well, with that being said, like, yeah, does that help?
No, 100%. It puts, as you said, the ball back in their court. Because whenever I'll get asked that question, I'm like, oh shit, like I'll sell myself, right, the incorrect way, like explaining, hey, I'm a hard worker, this and that, but instead of as you said, putting it back in their court.
Yeah, 100%.
Fidel, don't you think that question's kind of like they want to see you squirm, or they want to see if you're going to squirm to a question where, like, they put you on the spot like that?
Yeah, it's a shit test for all my Red Pill guys.
That's what I was going to use that term, but I didn't know if everybody knew what that meant.
Yeah, it's a shit test, right? Of it's a hard question. How are you going to answer it? I don't think going into selling yourself mode is bad. People get jobs doing that all the time, guys. Like, your average tech salesperson does not conduct an interview to this level, right? The only reason, again, why I know this information, I've been on a shitload of interviews because I'm always applying. I'm always testing the market, what my value is. I'm applying for roles I'm not qualified for you right now. That I'm not qualified for. Because I'm like, fuck, if I actually get through, I'll go through with it, right? If they'll take me. That's why I'm always strategically job hopping and going up market as well, too, by the way. Because I'm applying for roles. It's like, okay, for a this enterprise role, they said they want 10 years of experience. I have 7, but fuck it. Maybe they catch something on my resume. They like that I have industry experience. Or they like that the past 2 years I hit quota, right? So maybe they'll give me an opportunity. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. If I'm getting auto rejected and not even getting past the screening interview, then I know because based on the JD, if I don't match it, I'm like, okay, the market is telling me that I'm not qualified yet. So I take my foot off the gas, right? So I'm always testing my value, right? Of what I can get in the job marketplace. Hell, I went on an interview for a fucking VP of sales for like a Series A company last month, just to like test the waters. I'm like, okay, this is pretty interesting. Like, it was an inbound invite. I was like, I'll probably never do this, but I wanted to test my market, right? What does the comp look like? What does the opportunity look like? So you should ABI, right? Always be closing. I believe in always be interviewing to understand where you fall on the totem pole. But yeah, 100%. And it comes with experience, guys. That's what I'm saying. Like, it has to come with mass applications simultaneously with, we talked about how to land a tech sales job in previous call recordings. You're going to have your top 100 list of the fastest growing companies with the fastest growing sub verticals, right? So my top 4 fastest growing verticals in the software market. Then with under that vertical, the sub verticals, the fastest growing sub verticals in the software market. Okay, those top 4, I'm going to pick 25 of the fastest growing companies inside of those sub verticals, because that's where I know where the money is, right? If that company is growing, that means that their reps are selling. That means that the reps are making money. That's the company that I want to join. So I make my top 100 list. I add the contacts, right? I do the referral based approach plus the cold outbound strategy on all those contacts that I add from that company, from a manager perspective, recruiter, and active reps at the title in which I'm applying for. So I'm always having a top 100 list sit. It doesn't matter at what point in my career I'm at, right? If that list gets smaller, right, as you have more conversations and you get more experience and your title gets bigger and all these different things, my top 100 list is now like a top 12 list. But if that company reaches out to me or they reply to the application, I'm 100% taking the interview. I don't give a fuck. If I get an offer from my top 12, I'm going to highly consider it or take it. You guys should do the exact same thing in your career, right? But with that being said, that's going to also skill you up from an interview perspective, right? To where you can get to that point of competency where you're pre-predicting questions. You already understand what they're looking for. You already understand what your narrative looks like. You already understand your answer to these questions, but you're not going to get to that point unless you're practicing. Unless you're role playing with myself or other people inside of the community, or just going on a shitload of interviews, you're going to fumble that question, right? But if you've been asked it, okay, I'll give you guys context of how serious I take things. Okay, which other people that are successful in this community do too, right? Like when I was looking for a role, the hardest transition for me was from SMB to mid market. That was like the hardest jump. Like SDR to AE, I didn't have a problem. Like SMB, mid market to enterprise, I didn't have a problem. From SMB AE to mid market AE, okay, it took me about 5 months. Reason being was that it was at the worst time possible. It was like literally at the height of like layoffs and a shitty job market of like 2023 or 2022, whatever at that point was. But it took me like 5-6 months. So, but during that 5-6 months, it's not that I didn't get an offer. I got multiple offers. I actually had 7. It's just I accepted one during that time because it was the best opportunity. But with that being said, I was going on interviews every single day during that entire time, at least recruiter calls. When I say interview, right? I was taking recruiter calls with the good, bad, and the ugly. Because I haven't interviewed in a long time. I was like, fuck, I'm kind of rusty. I've been at this other company in the SMBA role, right? So I was receiving all invitations, cold applying. Like I would even forget some of the companies. I'm like, fuck, I have 3 back-to-backs with different companies. Right. And I would like have to look it up on my calendar when I accepted the call. I'm like, oh, hey, Chelsea, how are you doing? You're with Chat AE. How are you? Yeah. How was your Tuesday? Right. That's how back to back, how much I filled my calendar to get that exposure, to skill myself up in that manner. Right. Now, I learned a lesson at that time, right? 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, that you never let the dust collect when it comes to the interviewing skill, right? Because that's your job security. That's your cash flow. That's your career. That's your life. Right. So always be interviewing, right? But, one interview every single day, if not maybe even multiple interviews, in the same day, to where you're going to get to a point where you're going to roll your eyes at the questions because you already know the way the conversation is going. Like I already know Kelsey about, oh, why are you interested in Microsoft? Like I already have the exact same answer to the same subset of 10 questions for the recruiter call. I already have the exact same answers the way I'm going to answer for the hiring manager call. He's going to ask the exact same shit. Oh, Fidel, I saw you're 109%. Like talk to me a little bit about that. It's like, it's the same fucking answer for every company. Do you get me? That's where I want to get you guys to the point to be. But you can only do that. Fidel cannot help you do that. You can only do that through exposure by going on a lot of interviews, thinking of your responses and getting that market feedback. It's just like sales. I can't help you with objection handling. You need to go through the exposure to receive the objections. Now you understand what are the most common objections you get on the phone. So you're pre-predicting those objections and you already have responses to those objections. Right. That's the competency you need to get to where it's like what we call unconscious competency. Right. If Ian were to hit me with a, hey, Fidel, I'm not interested, I already know what my exact answer would be. Hey, when you say you're not interested, does that mean you're not interested now or you're not interested ever? Hey, Fidel, I don't have the budget, right? Like I'm going to rattle off the answer. But that's because you have a lot of experience. You have a lot of reps. So reps are everything, guys. Like keep that top 100 list. Those are the companies that you're actually hunting after. But I'm going to take interviews with everyone to literally just practice on them. sorry, recruiter, sorry, manager, I'm wasting your time, but I don't want to practice on the companies I actually give a fuck about. I'll practice on the Series A company, Series B company, Series C. Oh, you want to be a VP of sales? Sure, I'll practice on you. Right? But obviously, I'm not going to consider them. I'm not going to accept the offer. Maybe I may not even go through the entire interview process with them. But I'm still getting that exposure, right? To where I'm that muscle is being worked. Is this helpful to people? Cool. What else you guys got?
Can you kind of talk about something you mentioned to me before? Like once you get to a certain tenure and seat at a company that you're like, when you're looking to go up market, right? Maybe not landing the first. Like when does that kind of start to turn into a lot more like inbound opportunities? Like how do you feel those compared to things that you might look to source on your own?
Yeah, so I think a lot of them should be sourced from your network, right? For anyone that has more than a year of corporate experience, you should never be in a position where you are cold applying. Okay. Like you should have a Rolodex literally text right now. One of the guys on Twitter, Sonny, we have a great relationship. We worked at a previous company together. We're always like keeping tabs on how are things going in the industry, how are things going in the market, where's competition? Oh, this competitor's hiring a lot. Yeah, I know a guy that works there, Fidel. I could refer you in if you're looking for a job. Like I do that throughout my entire career, right? Sonny's one of them. Mo hits the other one, right? There's other people that you build relationships that you have a network with. Other people in my network that aren't on Twitter. But just to give you guys an example, those are the relationships you should be building. And that's the opportunity that I created for everyone inside of the Desperado Sales Group. Like you already have a community that you're paid for. Like use other people that are here, right? Will, you should be networking with Ian, 100%. Ian's a little bit farther ahead, but he has more network. He has more experience. He has more insights. Like you guys should always be networking with these other people so that you create that sort of opportunity for yourself to always get referred in, and you don't have to outbound the referrals. You legitimately have a referral, right? To give you guys an example, that during that 5-month period, it was a referral from a buddy in the industry, but honestly, it wasn't a good opportunity. Like I thought I already had something secured. I'll give you guys a story just to give you a background. And this is a lesson, right? Never leave a job without a job offer signed. Okay, I learned that lesson when I went from SMB to mid-market. So I was already going through the interview process, currently employed. I was ahead of my number, but there was no promotion path. So I was looking at mid-market, reached out to my network. Hey, looking for opportunity, mid-market role. One guy had something available to me. So he set up the interview. I went through the entire interview process. I got when I went to the last round with the VP, which by the way, we didn't talk about that today. Maybe we'll do another call to talk about the last round of the interview with the VP director panel interview. But with that being said, they referred me in, went through the entire interview process. They liked me. However, when I got to the VP level, okay, a qualification question, I was asking things more high level about their business unit, what the performance looks like, a lot of these different things. And he shared that they were going under an acquisition right now. They're being acquired, which typically means no bueno, right? That means that they're going to be shuffling the stack. There's going to be a lot of different changes. Like that VP's job is at risk. So I know as a brand new AE, like my job is definitely going to be at risk as well too. And that was a part of the reason why I declined the offer. Actually, I told him on the interview that I didn't want to move forward because of that. Right. And he's like, hey, I completely understand, like, whatever. Which by the way, that VP actually shortly left the company, but I knew it was going to end up being a shit show. Right. So I had to back up a plan B that I had an offer for. I accepted the offer at that company. I quit my job and took a vacation. Like I took a 2-3 week vacation. Basically, I was like, I want to be fun employed for a couple weeks, whatever, before my new job. So I took 2-3 weeks off, and they rescinded the offer because they said that they're going through changes in the company. They're actually downsizing. It was a shitty time in the job market, right? So whatever, they rescinded the offer, and now I was out of a job, right? So always ensure that you don't quit before you have that offer signed 100% with the start date. Like if you want to be really conservative, you actually receive the tech, like you're actually being onboarded before you quit your job. So then I had to scramble for an opportunity, and I had nobody else inside of my network with a referral. So if you have years of experience, it's very long-winded, but I'm trying to give you guys as much information as possible on this call so it can be value packed. You know, your network, if you have more than 1 year of experience, especially if you work at a big company, you guys should have a huge network of people that left the organization. They go to different companies. Your manager goes to a different company, VP, whoever else it is, that you can have an in into that organization if you plan on leaving your job or job hopping up market, right? So to go back to, and then from there, that's option A, right? Option B is the referral based strategy with people you don't know. Option C is the cold outbound approach, which most people do, which is, you know, cold calling the hiring manager, emailing the hiring manager. Like for people that are currently doing that, this is at the only point in your career that you should ever be doing that. Like that is for brand new people to the industry. If you're doing that and you're an account executive or you have a little bit of experience, you're wrong, and you did it wrong, right? You should have a network so you could Trojan horse backdoor, get that opportunity, provide you guys context of that opportunity. My buddy referred me into that I ended up not taking. I was interviewing for a role that wasn't even posted on LinkedIn yet. Was not posted on LinkedIn. When I told him during the interview I wasn't going to take the opportunity, they posted the job the next week. So people are interviewing for roles that aren't even there, right? Especially if you're a part of this, whatever, more experienced crowd inside of the industry, the referrals that you actually know people that work at the company, they're going to give you an opportunity. And oftentimes the interviews are actually going to be way more easier because if they respect the rep that's referring you in, right? So you're not just getting any referral if you want to be strategic about it. If you're going cold or you're getting a referral for somebody that you know, especially if they're a top performer. The guy that referred me in, he hit President's Club that year, and he was the top performer in the team. And I was interviewing with his manager. Like, no shit, they're excited about me because my cosign is huge, right? And I noticed that. That was the first time that I realized, I was like, holy shit, like this is not a normal interview. Like were not disqualifying me or asking any of those sort of hard questions. They were kind of giving me the opportunity, right? So definitely take advantage of that. But Ian, to ask your question specifically, I don't know when you will begin getting inbound interviews for upmarket roles. Typically, it's going to have to match the JD if they're reaching out to you because they have to be black and white by the book, right? If this opportunity says minimum 4 years of experience, if you don't have 4 years of experience, you're not even showing up in their search. So they're not going to reach out to you. I also had this conversation with Sam since he is a recruiter. They definitely have trigger events, just like when we prospect, of their top companies that they want to prospect into. If you guys have, you know, experience in big corporate or big companies, you'll notice that as well too, right? If you work at Oracle, their competitor Sage will always reach out to you once you hit 12 months. I literally had a guy when I worked there made a joke about it. He's like, "Hey, 1 year anniversary." He's like, I got you know, Kelsey, the recruiter, the DM, and everyone like laughed because they all have already gotten one too. Right. So they specifically reach out to reps around these time periods, like 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Past that period, they're like, okay, this guy's going to stay at this company. But during that time, that's when the highest churn is. Right. They realize like, okay, maybe I can catch the guy with 12 months that maybe he just had a bad territory and, you know, he's not doing well, but he would be a good fit for Sage versus hiring someone that's outside of the industry because they already know the way the product works. So you'll notice that around those time periods, 12, 18, 24 months, mostly between 12 and 18 months, they're going to start reaching out to you either for sideways steps like the same role, or it's got to match the JD black and white of we need 4 years of experience. But again, like I said, guys, it's about your strategy into the company. If you get a backdoor referral, okay, from a rep at the company and he's doing well and you got 2.5 years experience, but they want 3, they'll still give you an interview shot. And then if you craft a good narrative, like we just talked about, they'll give you the opportunity. It's happened throughout my career and it happens to other people in my network as well too. Right. So at the end of the day, it's about your interview skill versus honestly, your performance or your resume either. Like to like. Cool. Did that help?
Yeah, I just got a LinkedIn message while you were talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
if you have time for something else, I wanted to ask you, like when you're looking at making those moves up the different market levels, right, from SMB to mid market up to enterprise. I think you've talked about this before, but can you kind of explain how, like, you can normally go up the market or into like different industries, maybe one at a time, and kind of talk about, like you gave that example earlier with healthcare, right? Like, let's say you have a role and you're an SMBAE in the healthcare space right now, and you want to move to mid market, but like you also want to jump ship and get into a different industry that's growing. Can you kind of talk about like how you would strategize there? And then on top of that, and you're going to a new industry, like an interview process with a new industry, like let's say you're moving to cyber and you don't really know anything about cyber. Like to what level are they going to expect you to have the background knowledge, knowing that when they look at your resume, you don't have any experience in the industry? Like, are they going to test you harder on that? And what would you do to prepare?
No, they're actually going to test you less because they know that you don't have the knowledge. Versus, to give you an example, if I'm going from CrowdStrike to what's another big cyber company, Cloudflare,
Cloudflare.
they're going to test the shit out of me. Because again, in the manager's head, he's trying to bucket me. If I know my shit, I'm an A player. If I kind of do, B player. If I don't at all, C player. There's a reason why he's leaving Cloudflare. Red flag, we're not going to hire him. Right? They're actually going to test you more if you have industry experience versus not. And again, it's about narrative. Why are we having this conversation today? Hey, let me call out the elephant in the room. That's actually a huge point I didn't talk about today. Calling out the elephant in the room. What's the red flag on your resume? For me, it was shorter stints and less industry experience and just general lack of experience when I was going up market. Right? They're like, hey, you're going from ERP to HCM, and then it's like, why are you looking to get into the HCM space? But I already knew what the answer was. Right? And I kept on getting hit with that. By like my fifth interview, I was like, every fucking person saying the same thing. Like, why do they care? It's like, okay, now I'm just gonna call it out before we get started. Hey, John, before we get started, I'm sure that you've already taken a look at my resume. Wanted to share a little bit about why we're having this conversation today. Look, I have ERP experience. I'm going to the HCM space. I'm also moving up market from SMB to mid market. This is exactly why I think that this is the right career move for me. And then I went through all the answers. Right? Great organization. You probably recognize that I'm leaving right now. Unfortunately, the writing was on the wall in terms of the path to promotion. Right? They're consolidating the current employees that they have, which is actually true at the time. They're consolidating the current employees that they have, and that timeline to get promoted is now 3 to 4 years. However, if you take a look at my performance, you see that I was above quota and whatever, I hit 180%. So I feel as if at this point in my career, I'm outgrowing the organization. So I'm looking for a fast growing vertical in where you guys are outperforming compared to the rest of the market right now, which at that time HCM was. ERP was getting wrecked at that time. Right? Quota attainment was ass. It was like 38%. For whatever reason, they got hit super hard during whatever those years, which honestly they still kind of are. But HCM was doing well. HCM was up when you looked at the numbers because that was the list that I created. That's why they were on my top 100. Right. So that was the exact answer that I gave him. I'm like, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. My numbers were good, but I was like, if I looked at the rest of my team, we're sitting at like 38%. And also, generally speaking, in this industry right now, performance is down. However, HCM is the exact opposite. So I put together a little bit of research of the top performing industries that I want to join and be a part of. That's going to be able to take my career to the next level in 2023. I just pre-predicted their objection and overcame it. Now he can't say shit to me. Do you get it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So either based on feedback or based on, Fidel giving you feedback or the community, you need, because everyone has objections. Everyone has those yellow, maybe red flags on their resume, right? You need to call out those things up front. Call out those things up front, right? This is why it's valuable to have a conversation today. Set the context, control the conversation, craft the narrative with a little bit of ethos to pull them in and set next steps. Cool. There's a little bit more strategy behind that, Ian, as well as like when in regards to ACV. If you're going to strategically job hop up market, that's why I always recommend to people. Like my advice is never siloed. It's always together. And honestly, that's why, we're on record, but I'm gonna say off record, why people can't debate me or poke holes in anything that I say, because I've already thought about what the holes are. It's the same exact thing. Like when it comes to tech sales or it comes to interview, it's like I already know the things that you're going to bring up because I already understand what the objections are, and I've already thought about what the response is going to be. It's kind of like playing chess. I already know what the moves are, right? Because I have a lot of experience. But with that being said, when it comes to the general career advice of like, sticking to that timeline of top performance, even if you don't have top performance, you can still position yourself as top performance, right? Based on career progression, because that's the way you look at in the eyes of the recruiters. Like, oh, this guy went from SDR to SMB and now he's in mid market. Like, you're going to be more primed for that enterprise role, and I call that out as well too. I'm like, hey, if you take a look at my resume, I moved up market in 18 to 24 months at every single role, right? Because I have a proven track record of top performance, as well as my ultimate goal is getting to mid-market, more complex deals. It's a higher ACVs. It's more interesting to me. I can solve bigger problems. And by the way, I can get compensated for it more too. And they're like, fuck, this guy knows what he's doing. You know what I'm saying?
Is there like a downside to going into a different industry but taking like a
Yes,
lateral
learning
move
curve.
on paper?
Learning curve. Onboarding and learning curve that you don't understand the profile that you're selling to. You don't understand your product. You don't understand the challenges you solve for. So there's more upfront work versus if you were to stick in ERP your whole life. I'm selling to the ICP. It's the same fucking talk track. It's the same trigger events. It's the same thing, right? So it's much easier, right? You don't have to crack the code. But honestly, that code can be cracked, and that's all we talk about inside of this community is how to crack the code when it comes to prospecting strategy. But the sales process on the back end stays the same. Like the demo will change based on the value proposition and the product that you sell. And honestly, when you get up market, you have SCs for these things. I've actually never not had an SC in my life, by the way. Like, because I've always sold platforms, right? But yeah, those things change, right? The product, honestly, in my perspective, I don't really give a fuck about because I can learn the product and I'll have an SC that honestly like does the demo. But it's more about like, understanding the challenges that you solve for, how to target those people correctly, and more of the fundamentals. But we built a formula that you can plug into it, especially for the SDR contract stackers. That's absolutely necessary to do as well too, right? But yeah, that's the risk. But most people that are average people, Ian, people that are C players and B players, yeah, they fail. They go to a new industry and they're like, oh, I don't understand anything about them. And they always say it's product. It's not product. You just don't understand the challenges that you solve for and how to target because you don't have a methodology to it. But we have a methodology to it. So it doesn't matter what I sell. Do you get me? So the common advice, right? It's kind of like the 401k or not the 401k. It's like Social Security. It's like retard proof, right? Where it's like we gotta save the plebs from not saving retirement. So we gotta force take the money out of your paycheck so you don't end up homeless at 65. Because we know Americans will just spend their money, right? So there's kind of like these retard proof things that they set. That's kind of the general advice that I am the contrarian will speak out against is like, hey, dude, if we're scrolling this app, we're talking about a career. You guys are listening to a call right now at 6 p.m. It's like you're not going to be the average person. And the normie advice is not good enough. That's not why we're playing this game. There's 10 other things that I could do that are much easier and make the same money doing. So I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people that are going to be an A player. That's only who I'm talking to all the time, So no, staying at a company for 2 to 3 years and waiting for the promotion and shit, that's for the plebs, dude. You don't want to be one, is what I'm saying. That's why you're here, too. So you're not one by way of that in itself, right? So yeah, I mean, general advice, they're gonna be like, yeah, stay in the same industry. But honestly, the interview is kind of harder, in my opinion, because they're gonna drill into you, especially if you work for a competitor. Like, hey, like you worked at Oracle. It's like, why are you Why are you thinking about coming over here? It's like, I know they know the numbers. Doug, I know your team's doing really well. I actually know your manager, right? He has a great team. He knows what he's doing. It's like, why are you interviewing with us? It's actually more difficult versus the arbitrage of going in and out of industries, especially when you go down in ACV. You go up in title and down in ACV, which is why I always recommend to people to go to platforms in the biggest companies possible, because you can always job hop up in title, okay, and OTE by going down in ACV. Because I'll give you guys an example. Like my SMB AE role, our product on average, the ACV was like 100K, right? It waned. It was lower deals were maybe like 60K, right? But the average deal size was around 100K, which is not SMB for most people. Most people think that's mid market. Okay, cool. It's because I sell an enterprise platform, right? So knowing that, I was like, okay, that means that I'm qualified to get a mid market role, because for a lot of other companies, this is mid market. So I went down. No, sorry, I stayed the same in terms of ACV, but I went up in title, I went up in comp. I went from a 75K base to 114, right? Because I grabbed that title. And then I moved outside of the industry. So no, I've never sold this particular solution before, maybe in the whatever SCM space. So the level of questions, they understand that I'm going into that with a lack of knowledge, versus if I work for a competitor, they're going to drill me on it. And they're probably going to know my company. They're going to understand my business unit. They're going to probably know my manager, because people that are in a particular industry typically stay in the industry. Cool.
Yeah, makes sense.
No, Jamal, I haven't had a new role since 2023. Yeah, I mean, it depends on your goals. Like, I think that a true mid-market role is the perfect mix of deal velocity and deal size and comp, right? SMB is not enough comp. Enterprise is not enough deal velocity, in my opinion. Like going back, if I wasn't in the particular situation that I'm in, I wouldn't be in the enterprise space. I'd probably sit in mid-market. There's just less bullshit, to be honest with you, like in terms of like legal reviews and boards and dealing with public companies, like a lot of this different shit. Too much to lose. Yeah, you can that's what it is. What's that concept? It's like you miss by an inch, you miss by a mile. That's the way enterprise is. Like I fuck off a couple accounts, I'm screwed for 12 months.
Yeah, like dumb luck could put you at 80 instead of 130.
100. Yeah, because there's not that many opportunities, right?
It's like the
I went
the
from
law of
closing
large
a deal-
numbers
I
in
went
reverse.
from closing a deal a quarter to working a deal a quarter, pretty much. Right. So yeah, there's you miss by an inch, you miss by a mile with enterprise, which is why the fail rate is so big in enterprise, and why I don't recommend it to people either. At my age, honestly, it's a little bit above my too slow for my pace. It makes more sense if you were, again, in the profile of that manager I was telling you guys about. He's like, yeah, I got 5 kids and I'm looking for more time with my kids. It's like you could do that in an enterprise role, because there's not actually like needle moving things that you can do on a daily basis, right? Slow is steady. It's more research based. It's more methodical, right? You got to wait on timing to break into accounts, and then you nurture those accounts. A lot of those different things. To where it's slower. It's like that's why I have the availability to do what I'm doing right now. It's like I could technically take off an hour at 10 a.m. if I wanted to, or 3 p.m. if I wanted to. It's not going to actually do anything, right? Unless something's scheduled. But in SMB, you can't do that. Like you got to be actually on. You got to close a deal. Whatever, 2-3 deals per month, right? Or mid market, you got to close 1 deal per quarter, and you just get more support as well too. Like right now, I have 4 BDRs that set appointments for me. I have 4 BDRs. I have 2 channel partners that are assigned to me, and 3 channel partners that are unassigned to me that send me leads. And then I self prospect as well too, right? So it's like I don't need to actually be in it as much anymore. So if you have a family, you have kids, you're looking for that slower pace, you want more time freedom. Yeah, I mean, enterprise AEs, dude, these guys fucking take off at like 1:30 and shit. Especially if they hit their number already, or they have like a deal in the pipe that they know is going to close. It's like there's nothing for you to do right now, honestly, right? Because you got to wait on timing into breaking into these accounts. You understand the acquisition has to go through in October before you have a conversation. Well, then there's fuck all for you to do right now, right? Versus again, mid market, more accounts, more opportunity, higher deal velocity. It's less of the case in SMB. It's absolutely not that case. So for most people that are probably listening to this call or at this point in their career, like, I don't know. I don't know. It's not for everyone. I think mid market's the perfect mix where it's like you kind of have that balance where you have more time and flexibility of schedule, but you can also, have more swings at the bat, right? You can play baseball numbers in SMB and mid market, right? You gotta, it's more of like F1 in enterprises where it's like you can't jerk the wheel too much, otherwise you're fucked. Um, to where you kind of get that balance. You can make good money. You can make overperform on a mid market quota. And I talked about people on my team. I've seen them make 450, 480, and these types of numbers where it's like that's kind of enterprise comp if you overperform on mid market. But that's true all the way up, right? An enterprise BDR that is President's Club is going to make more than your average SMB AE, right? Your President's Club SMB AE is going to make more than your average mid market rep, right? Your President's Club mid market rep is going to make more than your average enterprise rep. So you just got to find it's really what pace do you like. Most people don't like SMB pace. It's too grindy still. Like SDR pace is the fastest pace, slows down a little bit more for SMB, slows down a little bit more for mid market, and then you're kind of at like a crawl of enterprise. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, mid market plus Wi-Fi money. That's freedom. 100%. Mid market plus Wi-Fi money. Get the Wi-Fi money to replace your base salary first, then replace your OTE. That is freedom. Cool. What else you guys got? I canceled that other meeting. I don't really care. I'm gonna be here. These things excite me. I love having conversations with you guys, especially if you bring like questions and stuff like that. So I'm free to rip. I don't really care. It could be interviews, it could be SDR.
Do you want to talk about like you want to talk about the sectors and industries that you see are kind of like ripping right now? Like I know you said you have a top 12, and like I'm going through this process right now. But it's something I don't think a lot of people think about, like you said, just all the time. I think it's something people technically or typically think about when they need one, when they need a job.
Top industries. Yeah, I mean, it's just data backed, right? It's a research based approach. So I mean, it just prompted. Right. I'm not exactly sure what industry right now. Let me try to think back to the guy I was just working with. Hold on, let me give you the answer. 30 seconds. I'm sure I already know what it is. It's probably cyber, it's probably AI. That's 2 of the 4.
If you want like another quick one too, like
Yeah,
I was
there you go.
thinking
AI, cyber, fintech, and healthcare.
healthcare is interesting.
Would not advise healthcare because they're literally about to get crushed. Below healthcare is construction or prop tech.
I think like selling healthcare, like being a healthcare tool, may not be terrible because I think what's going to happen after this, like after the changes from the bill go into effect, it's going to be more like all these healthcare businesses are going to be a little more like cash strapped and going to be forced to make themselves more efficient, right? So like cut headcount, but become more efficient with the workers they do have. So there's probably like some tools in that space that are still going to do very well because they're going to have to, you know,
But Fortunately, dude, the way it works is they turn off the tap.
Mm.
It's like no investments for 2025. Like that's the way companies like they make drastic changes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you think based more like on Medicaid cuts and stuff like that, that they're gonna forecast like lower earnings and then
Well,
budgets
yeah,
are gonna
pure
go
funding.
the same direction, obviously.
Yeah, just pure funding. Like what I said before, like they cut off the funding for that vertical basically. That means tax credits. That means software. Right? That means VC money. That means PE money, equities market for all of that vertical.
Yeah, I guess a good example, like I think you told me this before. It was like, when Biden got elected and all the green energy credits like started going crazy. So
Yeah.
like tech surrounding that space were huge, and EVs, right? And then Trump gets elected, and those things are obviously going to get cut because that's the way the pendulum swings.
Yeah. Less hiring in that space, less growth of that company. Less growth means less people are selling because less companies are going to buy it because they're less incentivized, right? And it just falls all the way down to our quota based on regulation, right? So yeah, I wouldn't advise being in that space. Yes, there's going to be opportunities and there's value propositions, but honestly, if companies are in that state where things are contracting, they're not going to make an investment anyways. I don't know how many times I've tried to spend time with like a yellow light prospect that's like, there's a trigger, it's a negative trigger. How much more difficult it is to sell on a negative trigger because at the end of the day, like dollars and cents, like they just simply can't justify the investment, right? It's like it's too big of a risk.
Right. They're
300
coming from a
right
place of
now.
pessimism. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, to invest 300K right now when I know that we're going to drop by 13%.
Right. Like they need to spend money to stop the bleeding, and like that's a very hard thing to do psychologically. Whereas like,
They don't.
oh,
They
we're smashing all our targets. They just upped our budget. Like they're gonna spend that like crazy because it's everything's good. Everything feels good. It makes sense to spend money when you're making money.
Yep. They spend money when they're making money. That's why we follow the money when we're prospecting, and also like just the way businesses operate, like the way CFOs operate. Like you can cut costs to grow. That's what companies have been doing. That's why my value proposition has been cutting costs. My value proposition is no longer growth. My value proposition, oh yeah, this is going to create more efficiency, save you time, and help you grow. No, that was 2021, 2020, 2018. Now it's, hey, this solution can reduce operating expenses because I know that you guys are thinking about cutting back on expenses in order to grow your company to become more profitably. It's easier to cut expenses to grow versus add revenue to grow. Gartner came out with a statistic. Okay, I'm gonna probably fuck it up. Yeah, for every $1 in revenue added to the company, it's equal to saving $4 for a company. So again, it's much easier to cut costs to grow the company in terms of profitability.
So would you say, I mean, to reiterate, saving money would be a lot better than to make the company more money? Is that what I'm getting at?
In short, yes. In short, yes. Technically speaking, financially speaking, the answer is yes. That's why when there's contractions in the market, they let go of a shitload of people. They're like, okay, we're not going to hit our target of growing at 10%. Okay, let's lay off 1,000 people. That's how we can get to 10%. Right? Because it's about profitability. Right? If the profitability after operating expenses, okay, well then let's look at the operating expenses line item and reduce it. Now I have more profit. Same $1 million, but it's much more difficult to add new business. It's more costly to add business. You got to market, you got to hire a salesperson, you got to sell the product. The product costs an amount, right? To where your profit, basically, to give you guys a simple example, I sell a product for $10. My operating expenses are $7, so my profit is $3. Well, the cost of that product now went up to $9, so my profit is now whatever, $1. So how can we increase the profitability of the company? Do I want to create more transactions, which is much more difficult to get to the same profitability of 3? Now I got to sell 3x the product. I got to grow my company by 3x. Or would I rather reduce that cost of $7 down to the original number to get to my profitability of 3? Reduce that number from 9 back down to 7 to get to 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's fucked up, but that's the way it goes. So yeah, we never want to. We don't want to sell to failing companies, right? Because, like Ian said, psychologically, when it comes down to brass tacks, like we're irresponsible to spend this money right now. Plus, I can just lay off some people, use a new vendor to decrease my operating expenses to get the same result of me adding this fancy technology to grow my company. Because I got to onboard it, I got to implement it. Hell, does this shit even work? There's a lot of risk. So they'd rather just be like, nah, I'd just rather cut the expenses, and they wait. Versus good times, like Ian said, right? The spigot's on, right? Money's flowing. It's like, yeah, we're gonna make that reinvestment back into our business. Now is the time to invest to proactively grow, and how you position yourself is hedging against risk of downturn in the future. Reducing operating expenses will always be a stronger value proposition compared to growth. You should always be positioning, especially right now, about how your solution saves money, not makes money. So in order to do that, you got to show them how status quo is an opportunity cost. Where are they hemorrhaging money by keeping things the same? And how does their solution help them stop hemorrhaging money to justify making this investment? Because my solution directly reduces your operating expenses. Which, by the way, for Ian, if you're still in here, your solution specifically does that.
Not right away, which is a lot of the pushback I've been getting lately.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, and that's tough to juggle. It's like, yeah, we don't want to invest. We don't want to do a 10 grand investment this year just to save, 40 or 50 over the next 3. It's like, well, I can't help you there. If you can't
Honestly,
afford it, you can't afford it, right?
of the company. Like, I don't understand, and this is off topic for everyone.
Wait,
but
say that again. You cut
That's
out there for a second.
that's a positioning issue for your company, which I don't
Yeah.
understand what they're thinking from like a business unit perspective. Because for what you sell, the value proposition is much better for a company 10x aside of the companies you're talking to right now, because the impact is more. Right. And I had this conversation with someone previously of like, hey, how do I, sell my product if it's more expensive than competitors? It's like, I would much rather be the product that's more expensive than the competitors, because the impact and the value is much greater as well too. And that's also true for selling up market. It's actually takes the same amount of work, but it's easier to sell a more expensive product. It's much harder to sell a $10,000 product than it is a $100,000 product or a $100,000 deal, because the $100,000 deal is going to lead to 2 million versus me spending 10K when money's tight. For me to make 20K, it's not really worth it. It's just like an investment, right?
Yeah, I was
I'd
working on
rather
a deal
have-
with my partner this week, and he was saying like, let's start at a 10% discount. I was like, why? And he's like, because the number, it looks better, it looks easier to swallow. I'm like, we didn't even present it yet. Number one, and number two, if we start at 10 and they still want a discount, where are we going to go from there? Like, we're just eating into our own commission checks and revenue numbers at that point. It's like, if it's not worth it to them at full price, it's not going to be worth it to them at 20% off either.
Yeah, for sure. It really doesn't move the needle, honestly. Discounting as far as like a negotiation tactic, it doesn't like negotiate anything.
No, and I'd rather like waive a setup fee, right? If it's like a current client, right? Because that makes sense to me. Like, oh, why do I need to pay a setup fee? I'm already your client. Like, okay, fine, I'll waive that. But like, I'm not going to discount.
Yeah. Because the price of the deal is the multiplier, right? That's the multiplier on the return on investment. You know, and again, if you have the money, let's think about like the stock market. Would you rather make 8% on 100K or make 8% on 10K? 10K, 8% is not worth it. I'd rather spend 10K. At least that's my mindset, like personally, you know, it's like, it doesn't even move the needle. It doesn't do anything for me. So it's not worth the risk, even if it doesn't pay off. So that's why, again, like why it actually, in my opinion, like mid-market's the best too, because it's like bigger deal sizes, bigger return on investment, more value you can sell. You can build up the value. Why can we justify 100K? This is why. Versus like smaller deals, like there's not enough meat on the bone for particular products, like at least yours, Ian, specifically as well too, because it doesn't drive that much impact. So it's not for those people anyways.
Yeah, and they're like too early in their like business life cycle, I guess. Like too, it's like they're early enough to start offering some perks and stuff, but not like everything all at once. And that's the rub right now. It's like most of them, it's just like probably 2, 3, 4 years early for something like this.
Yeah, I would agree. See, that's why I don't know. I don't know why they're targeting people like that. I mean, but yeah, I mean, there's nothing we could do about that. But anyways, okay, cool. Anything else you guys got? What's going on, Jamal? I know it's been a while since the last time we chatted. Kevin. Seen some rolls on 150 to 280K. Oh, what are your thoughts on GTM roles for startups and what they need to be successful? Like, provide a little bit more context, like becoming a GTM like position. Like
It's probably like what Ben does for SIF, like head of GTM. Remember when we had him in here?
Yeah. No, I was just asking like what he's meaning by the question. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a particular profile, right? Like people that are in RevOps definitely don't want to be salespeople. It's a completely different job. Like it's a different universe, honestly. It's like you spend your time with data and like compensation packages and like market positioning and more back end things, right? It depends because GTM is very broad. Like you could be in go to market, but you're doing like compensation analysis. Like those are the people that actually like pay you out your commissions and like work with billing and shit. So it really depends on what the role is, you know. But it could also be from like a marketing perspective or you know product perspective to help out with those conversations. So it's so wide. Honestly, I can't really answer your question if you catch my drift here. Yeah, data, sales, and marketing. That's fair. Would you ever get into VC work? I would get into VC work if I was the VC. So I wouldn't work in a VC firm because I don't want to be an underwriter like analyst or a portfolio manager or anything like that. Like I would create a VC firm as an angel investor and create a firm around me if I were to ever get into investing into companies. But in order to do that, you got to be like, you know, liquid as fuck, right? High net worth, high net worth individual. Okay. All right, guys. It was a pleasure. I know we didn't get to the round of the VP sales in the panel interview. I'll probably knock that out at the front of our next group call. But definitely listen to this information, listen back to it. I know we covered a lot of different things. So take notes. I'm going to provide a transcript to you guys, as well as the general interview question checklist. Hope you found this valuable, and I will see you guys in the next one.